Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puck On. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Welcome back to Tip Today, and it's time for global news. And as usual on a Monday, glad to be joined by Thomas Conway of the Nina Guardian. Good morning to you, Thomas.
Good morning, Fran.
Thanks for coming into us today. It has to be the Epstein files, I guess. Would you just remind people who and what exactly are the Epstein files?
Yeah, so after months and I suppose years of waiting, a trove of documents were released on Friday, known as the Epstein files. Now, it's not all of them, it's not all encompassing, and Trump's Attorney General Todd Blanche has said that more documents will be revealed over the coming weeks. But the Epstein files relate to the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, who was, by all accounts, a powerful man and wielded a lot of influence over some of the most powerful people on earth. He was found to have been guilty of sex trafficking, trafficking minors and underage girls. And this all emerged in around 2004. He was subsequently tried. Eventually, he died by suicide in prison in 2019, or at least that is the
Allegedly,
theory.
yes.
There are conspiracy theories around it. So the Epstein files were a huge batch of documents relating to him. They contained travel records, they contained photos, archived material, purporting, there was a conspiracy theory purporting that Epstein was at the centre of essentially a group of paedophiles at the centre of power in Washington. And many of the MAGA faithful, the Trump supporters, had been intent on seeing these files because they believed that these people needed to be exposed. And it's not just, I suppose, the MAGA supporters. You have people from across the political spectrum, Democrats as well. I suppose the big question people are asking, what did we learn from the trove of documents that were released on Friday? Not an awful lot that we didn't know before. I think it signalled how powerful and influential Jeffrey Epstein was. I mean, he was pictured with Bill Clinton in a swimming pool. There was pictures of him. There was one picture of Donald Trump which was subsequently withdrawn and then put out again for use. Other celebrities to be included in the files: Michael Jackson, Diana Ross, Chris Tucker, Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones, and of course Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Unflattering images of him at Sandringham, the royal estate in the UK. So it's disturbing stuff, really.
No, it's important to point out that just because people are photographed
Indeed.
with Epstein, I mean, it could be just a photograph.
Yeah, it doesn't imply guilt.
Yeah.
They could have been just with him, and he moved in those circles.
Yes.
I mean, as I said, he was a financier. That's how he amassed his wealth, and his wealth was so significant. He owned an island and properties all over the globe, and this was, I suppose, how he got the access to these powerful individuals. The big question, I suppose, that emerges in the wake of the release of documents on Friday was, was Donald Trump, to what extent was Donald Trump involved with Jeffrey Epstein?
And did we learn anything more about that?
Well, interestingly, I was watching Friday night. He had a big press conference with pharmaceutical executives. For once, he refused to take questions afterwards. Now, that is untypical of Donald Trump.
What is that telling you? What is that saying to you?
I think it's signal that he doesn't want to be probed on the issue. There are obviously more documents to be released. He has consistently denied that he was involved with Epstein once this bad stuff emerged.
He said he fell out with him about 2004 or something.
2004, yeah. And he said he had it's pretty clear he had a close enough friendship with him. There are pictures documenting that prior to 2004, but after that he realised the gravity, I suppose, of Epstein's crimes.
But the fallout was about a business deal, I understand.
Yeah, and there were allegations that Epstein was stealing workers from his Mar-a-Lago estate, and they fell out over that.
Oh, right. Okay.
So it wasn't directly related to what Epstein was doing, but certainly I just could not get over the amount of power and influence that Epstein had.
And speaking of which, will you tell me about the Downing Street aspect?
I thought that was very interesting. There was a picture of Ghislaine Maxwell, who is, I suppose, Epstein's partner in crime. She's currently in prison, tried for sex trafficking or aiding and abetting it. A picture emerged of her outside the door of 10 Downing Street. Now, it's subsequently emerged that the picture was taken in or around 2004.
So who was
Tony Blair would have been in power. So there is no allegation against Tony Blair here. But how she ended up, I mean, not, you can't just walk up to 10 Downing Street and take a photo outside the door. It's heavily guarded. There's heavy security. So
she would have had to have been invited there, is that what you're saying? So
that prompts all sorts of questions. In what capacity was she visiting Downing Street? Why on earth was she close to the corridors of power in the UK? We know how close she was in the US, but also in the UK. And a lot of Epstein's links extend into the United Kingdom, so it's very interesting. He had his fingerprints everywhere.
The thousands of pages that have not been released, Thomas, why haven't they been released, by the way, first of all?
Well, that is the question. They say they didn't have enough, the US Justice Department, that is, the Department of Justice says they did not have enough time to go through the documents in full, that there are so many of them. Because this was prompted by a legislation passed by a Democrat and a Republican a number of weeks ago, mandating the US government to release the files, mandating the Department of Justice to release the files by last Friday. So the fact that they haven't done so, they're actually, what they're doing is illegal because the deadline was last Friday. But Trump has bypassed Congress before and has been in defiance of laws. And,
Right. And in terms of the redacting and the like, who's responsible? Who makes the decision on that? So
apparently the redacting is done so as to preserve the anonymity of victims. And on one level you can see that, obviously, you want to protect the victims of this.
So it's victims that are redacted?
Yeah, but that's the theory. But I mean, there are heavily redacted pages in this. There are entire pages that are blacked out. Literally, you have a blank page with a black square on them because the information is blanked out. Photographs, blanked out faces, all sorts of material like that, and that has proven very frustrating, as you'd imagine, for the people.
Is there cover up here?
Yeah, that's the major question, and I think it's no coincidence that in this first trove of files, Bill Clinton features heavily. And not Donald Trump. I think there was a degree of media, more than a degree, a good touch of media management here. The files were probably managed and choreographed so that they would put out a certain narrative. And I'd imagine the Department of Justice officials are working overtime in order to present the most flattering narrative of Donald Trump. So yeah, that is the question. Like, Trump overpromised on this and he underdelivered with the cache of files that he released. So is there a cover-up? I mean, it looks for all the world like a cover-up, but it's certainly... It's the one thing that Trump has not been able to brush aside. Everything over the course of the past 10 years, he's proven himself to be politically bulletproof, but not on the Epstein issue, because it comes from within his own support base. They want these files to be released, and they want them released in full. And I should say, the timing to release it around Christmas is also very strategic. It's kind of somewhat of a silly season, and people kind of turn off from the news to a certain extent. But yeah, it's the whole process has been managed chaotically by the Trump administration, and it's the one issue that continues to bite. So we'll see what the coming weeks produce.
Right, it's going to be very interesting indeed. The renaming of the Kennedy Centre as well.
The Trump Kennedy Centre, God, yeah. I mean, John F. Kennedy will be turning in his grave, I would imagine. That emerged over the course of the weekend. The Trump Kennedy Centre is in Washington, or the Kennedy Centre, Trump Kennedy, and Trump has now added his name to it. This is part of his kind of restructuring of institutions. He's building a ballroom on the White House, and doing all these sorts of things. I don't know if you saw, there's a line of American presidents, of portraits of former American presidents in the West Wing, and Trump now has a little paragraph of his descriptions of him, or of his, so Joe Biden, underneath it, is the worst president in history, this kind of stuff.
I shouldn't laugh, but
I know. Well, yeah, you have to smirk at some bits of it. But
so he's adding these little plaques.
Yes, with his own tribute.
You're going to have a look at the key moments of 2025, and of course, needless to say, we're talking about global issues here, just in case people say, what about what happened here in Ireland? We're looking at global stuff here. So where do you want to even start with this,
I
Thomas?
suppose the obvious place to start is Trump's inauguration.
Yeah.
I mean, it was 12 months in which he remade the world in his image, essentially.
It's very biblical, Thomas.
Yeah, well, and he signalled as much. He signalled it throughout the election campaign in 2024. And from the moment he took office in this January and started signing those blizzard of executive orders, it was clear that this was going to be different this time around. And it was very different. I mean, among the moments to stick out, Liberation Day, the tariffs that upended the kind of economic order. He upended the post-war geopolitical order by kind of positioning himself closer to Vladimir Putin and Ukraine. You had that, I think, memorable and infamous spot with Vladimir Zelensky in the Oval Office. And if you were to ask me, do I have a moment of the year, a defining moment that stuck out, it would be that.
Would it indeed?
Yeah, I thought that was just, it stopped everyone in their tracks. The fact that this could happen in front of the cameras, with the cameras rolling in the Oval Office.
It's a remarkable piece of history.
It is,
really
yeah.
is.
And I suppose the prologue to it was that meeting in the Vatican and Pope Francis's funeral. I thought that was an iconic image. Now, what will come of it, how time will reflect on it, I'm not sure. But that was the image of Trump and Zelensky seated next to each other in St. Peter's Basilica. I thought that was might be an image for the ages, depending on how the war emerges. But then you move on then, and Pope Francis's death and the election of Pope Leo, hugely significant moments for
who recently spoke out, and I would gather he's not a fan of Mr. Trump.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. And I've heard, and it was one of the first times. You see, he's so multilingual. He usually speaks in Italian, or Spanish or whatever. But I heard him speak in English, and he expressed skepticism with that national security strategy and the way the European or American relations have developed with Europe. So maybe he's starting to speak out a little bit. But other things, there were lots of other things that happened. I mean, Friedrich Merz became Chancellor of Germany. That's one of the most powerful positions in the world. Another moment that stuck out for me was the Canadian general election and the rise of Mark Carney, the new Canadian Prime Minister.
Why was that?
Essentially,
so
because he turned the tables. The Liberal Party were about 25 to 30 points down in the polls a couple of months ago. And Trump came into office and Carney became leader. It became clear that Carney was the next guy to take him on. He started confronting Trump during the election campaign, that is. And suddenly his popularity rating shot up. And they completed an incredible comeback to win the general election comfortably in Canada. The former central banker became Prime Minister. And he's done a reasonable job so far. He's attempted to stand up to Trump, and it hasn't really worked. And I think that is down to America's economic might. I mean, it's the most powerful country in the world. It's also the most powerful economy on earth.
Did he need to apologise to him?
Yeah, that was over the Ontario Premier posting an unflattering video of Ronald Reagan denouncing tariffs, and the Canadian government are forced into a turnaround there. But apart from that, I think he's a sensible, pragmatic politician. I think, he has the trust of Canadians, and it was a big moment, certainly. Equally, the Australian election and Australia, Anthony Albanese, the Australian PM, has obviously been in the news over the past week because of the horrific Bondi shooting. But he secured another term. He secured another mandate, which was a boost for him. And then I suppose the issue that I think a lot of people in this country would be thinking of is Gaza and the turmoil in Gaza and the Middle East more generally. We had ultimately the ceasefire, which I would give a bit of credit to Donald Trump and Steve Witkoff. As unconventional as their strategies are, they did manage to stop the fighting somewhat. I know there's still, fatalities occurring in Gaza, and I know, that it's being partitioned essentially. But there is a hint of a pathway there towards a Palestinian state in that peace plan. And and I think they deserve a degree of credit on that one.
Rather fragile, though. Thomas,
Quite fragile, and that has to be said as well. In the middle of all that, a war between Israel and Iran, which trumped up the 12-day war. I mean, that was highly significant. That could have propelled the region, or propelled the Middle East into a region-wide conflict. And obviously, America bombed Iran's nuclear sites. That was a big intervention by Donald Trump, and there were many people within his movement, the MAGA movement, who were not happy with the way he intervened there. But it seemed to pay off, although I have my suspicions in terms of how damaged those Iranian nuclear facilities actually were. There are reports saying that they're still operational, or they are rebuilding
because
them.
they were buried so deep in the mountains and stuff. Is that it? Wow. Okay. What else, Thomas?
Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska and the war in Ukraine, obviously. I mean, he rolled out the red carpet for Vladimir Putin in Alaska, and any meeting between a US president and a Russian president is always going to be significant, but particularly this time around when Trump has positioned himself ostensibly quite close to Putin and taken a softer line than maybe presidents past. His speech to the UN General Assembly, Trump that is, in which he decries global warming. I mean, Trump delivers blockbuster entertainment speeches. I'll give that to him. You may completely disagree with what he's saying, but I mean, his ability to just to go on and on and on and invent his own terminology.
When almost everybody in that room disagreed with him, and he still held court there.
Yeah, and he holds, because people are fearful of him. So that was a significant moment. Sanai Takaichi became Japan's new prime minister. And two other big moments, which I'll pick out. Javier Milei, the Argentinian president, we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, consolidated his power, his mandate in Argentina. He won a series of elections, which kind of gave a boost to his economic project, his libertarian economic project, which seems to be working. And maybe a lot of people on the left of the political spectrum will not be happy to hear that, but he has introduced these bold economic reforms which have brought inflation way down and kind of stabilised an economy that has been unstable for decades upon decades. So I think he's doing a reasonably good job there. Now, it's not as well without its drawbacks, and there is still huge problems in Argentina, but from the economic data alone, it's certainly a better picture than it was a year ago. And another place where the scenario is better but not perfect is Syria. And there was that visit from the new Syrian president, Ahmed al-Shara, to the White House, during which Trump sprayed aftershave on him. Shara has this massive beard that would be quite typical of men in the Middle East. Well, Trump sprayed aftershave on him and asked him how many wives he had. Now, he replied that he'd only one. But that was a big moment for Syria at the same time,
Yeah, but remarkable with that man's history that he would be lauded in the White House.
A former jihad, a former member of Al Qaeda, quite a sensational turnaround. People say he had been building to this for a number of years, that he had been building towards this ultimate aim, and he has certainly risen up the ranks to an incredible degree. It's quite remarkable.
Yeah, you mentioned the new Japanese Prime Minister as well, but all not well between Japan and China then.
No, relations very much souring between Xi Jinping and the new Japan PM, Sanai Takaichi. And that is mainly because of, I suppose, the struggle over Taiwan to a certain degree. Japan would be quite steadfast in its support of Taiwan. China, of course, not quite planning for an imminent invasion, but certainly have their sights on Taiwan in the near future and see kind of an opening there. Nobody is sure whether Donald Trump would jump to Taiwan's aid, even though the Americans have called for a maintenance of the status quo in the Pacific. But certainly Japan's economy has been, it was stagnant for decades. It's improved slightly. COVID hit it hard. And it is the minor partner in that relationship. It does do a lot of trade with China. Crucially, though, it's a democracy. Even though one party tends to dictate, it is a democracy. The far right are on the rise there. But this woman, Sanai Takaichi, is a conservative, and she's kind of like-minded, and Donald Trump likes her quite a bit.
Interesting to watch that as well. The assassination of Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, I thought that was probably one of the grimmest moments of the year. Obviously, any type of political violence, but particularly an assassination. That was, you wondered, had the United States reached a nadir, reached a low point when that happened, because it just was illustrative of the way in which divisions have become so entrenched in the United States that it would lead to the killing of. He was a champion of the conservative movement, and you may not agree with everything Charlie Kirk said, but he was a skilled debater.
Especially to young people on the campuses.
Especially to young people. He was, like, you could describe him as the leader of the youth wing of the Trump movement, really.
How important was he to Trump?
I think he was quite important in cultivating that young people's vote and in promoting Trump's ideology, that conservative ideology throughout the United States. I think, like, he was very savvy in terms of social media. He communicated, a superb communicator. And as I say, you know, you mightn't agree with everything he said, but he actually engaged with people and debated with them. You know, he didn't dismiss them. He
gave them a platform to argue with him, but he was magnificent in terms of being a debater, though, and all of that. It's interesting, though, it's because it sparked so much conspiracy since he's dead.
Yeah, indeed, and that is, you know, it's amazing the conspiracy theories that do the rounds. Like, the manner of his death was so gruesome and all that people are asking, well, was this choreographed? I don't think it was myself, but certainly, you know, you just don't know with these things. I mean, I'm not a great believer in conspiracy theories, unlike J.D. Vance, perhaps his chief of staff, Susie Wiles, described him as a conspiracy theorist last week. But maybe some have a grain of truth in them. That's usually how they start, isn't it? They have a grain of truth.
Well, this is the thing about it, yeah. Do you want to look forward then for me? I mean, what are the biggies for 2026, do you think? What should we be keeping a very close eye on? I
mean, for the really interesting thing, and I was listening to it on radio this morning, an analysis of it, Ireland's presidency of the European Union in the second half of 2026, that will be crucial. And it will be crucial for a number of reasons. We'll host a number of high-profile political events, a meeting of the European political community, which is kind of a pan-European group, kind of headed by Macron and the main leaders. That, I think, is coming to Dublin, as far as I know. That will be a massive security operation, and I think we're going to have to up our game big time when it comes to security. And that we saw the drone incursions with Zelensky. Now that's not a slight on the Gardaí because we have run major security operations in the past. We'll say for Obama, for the Queen, and they have been superbly run. And I'd be confident the Gardaí and the security forces can pull it off again. But from a domestic perspective, I think that's going to be big. I think it will be interesting to see how Donald Trump's appeal, whether he starts to wane or not. You know, there's a question there, have we reached peak Trump? I think we're in it. I think we're in peak Trump at the moment. And by the time the midterms come around next November...
Yeah, but I was reading at the weekend, they're going to drive him out onto the road to canvass, basically, for the midterms. I mean, he's going to be their star attraction, isn't he?
Yeah, he will be. And we'll see the re-emergence of those rallies that he is so synonymous with. And that could actually shore up his support. That could boost his appeal yet again, because he's very skilled at those rallies, and you know it might energise the party. But a lot will hinge on how the Republicans get on in the midterms. And suddenly, then after the midterms, traditionally a second-term president is yesterday's man. I'm not sure that'll be the case when it comes to Donald Trump. I think he dominates the news agenda so much, but then there'll be a battle to succeed him. I think in pole position for that is Marco Rubio.
Do you think so?
Yeah, I think he has impressed me. Much more so than J.D. Vance. I mean, J.D. Vance was quite high profile at the beginning of this year and kind of faded as the year went on. I don't know, did people say something to him? Was he told to kind of taper it down a little bit? But certainly Rubio, by virtue of, I suppose, the Ukraine talks, has been more prominent. So I think he's the leading man to succeed Donald Trump, if there is a leading man, if he doesn't run again and defy the Constitution.
It's going to be interesting. Well, the sure thing is we will never be short.
No, that is absolutely true.
For our slot here on a Monday, that's for sure. So the big one for you anyway was the Oval Office spat.
Yeah, that was my moment of the year, yeah. Do you have one?
Do you know, when you said that, I'd probably go along with that, but I'd have to say, even though it's gruesome, the killing of Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
was just...
Yeah, and particularly the manner in which it was... and the fact that the footage was circulated and it was captured live, unfortunately.
And my fear at the time was that the reaction to it would have been bloody.
Yeah. And that is always the day that there would be reprisals or that there would be a response to it. It didn't really unravel like that, but, it is... Any time an assassination happens, you just have to... Like, we had the 1960s and JFK and RFK and Martin Luther King, and it brings you back to that era. So, yeah.
Well, that's for sure. Thomas, pleasure as always. Happy Christmas to you
Many
and
happy
your
returns, Fran, and to your listeners too.
Thanks very much indeed. Thomas Conway there of the Nina Guardian. News and information's on the way.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.